From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have on the program. Vitriol and violence. Political tensions reach boiling point as a German politician is attacked and British MPs are verbally assaulted. Protests crack down. New measures in France to punish people who hold unsanctioned protests. Brexit delay. Fresh speculation a March deadline could be pushed back to avoid a no-deal exit from the EU. Crash avoidance. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney talks about worst-case scenarios in an exclusive interview. And emergency measure. As Donald Trump considers unprecedented measures to build his wall, will other leaders be inspired to do the same? Well, it is time to meet our panel this evening. I'm joined by Darren McCaffrey, our political editor here at Euronews. Darren, which of these stories are you watching closely?
Well, I think as the maths still looks very difficult for Theresa May in Parliament next week. Lots of speculation about what could follow next, whether there's a second referendum, another election, potentially Britain crashing out with no deal. Also speculation that there might be an extension of Article 50. Interestingly, Simon Coveney, the Irish Foreign Minister today, suggesting that Ireland would not stand in the way of that. Is that a possibility to buy some more time?
Every day it seems to be a new possibility. All right. Joining us as well is James Chris. He's a Brussels correspondent with The Telegraph. James, what about you? What are you watching?
I'm enjoying looking at the latest twist and turn in the Gilets jaunes saga and how the EU poster boy Emmanuel Macron seems to just be getting more and more unpopular with every passing day.
A saga it is.
Brings a smile to his face.
I know, look at that. And Jacqueline Foster is joining us as well, the Deputy Leader of the British Conservative Party in the European Parliament, and she sits with the European Conservatives and Reformists group. Jacqueline, which of these stories are you watching closely?
Well, clearly, apart from Brexit, which clearly has been outlined very, very well, some of this violence and terrible behaviour, not only that occurred yesterday with Anna Soubry, one of our colleagues from the Conservative Party, but now apparently the leader of the Alternative for Deutschland party in Germany, he's now been attacked. So I thought I would just briefly comment on that.
All right. And actually, that is exactly where we are beginning our evening tonight, because it is a black day for democracy. Deterioration of the public order, that's what some politicians are saying after targeted physical and verbal attacks. Now, in Germany, Frank Magnitz, the leader for the Alternative for Germany party, as Jacqueline was mentioning, remains in hospital after he was attacked by 3 masked men wielding a wooden plank. The attack happened yesterday after he left a New Year reception in the city of Bremen. The attack comes just days after a device exploded outside an AfD office in Saxony. And in the UK, MPs are asking for more police protection against abusive protesters outside of Parliament. Now, pro-Brexit demonstrations targeted Tory MP Anna Soubry and Guardian columnist Owen Jones as they were walking outside Parliament. Let's take a look.
You lost the people's vote. Anna, you're a fascist. Anna, fascist. Anna Soubry, you're a fascist.
Can you just show that there are children?
You're a fascist. Anna, why do you call us EDL without any proof? We're not EDL, Anna.
Two police.
Anna, you're full of lies. Yes, Anna, you're a fascist. Anna, you're full of lies.
Listen, you are a horrible little liar. Horrible little liar. So how many people attended the Brexit
it's brutal out here.
How many?
Look at them.
Look, you can't even answer the question.
I've got an entire rally.
You have got to be
This is almost as big as Tommy Robinson's rally the other week.
You are
Biggest
a disgrace.
Oh, a disgrace.
You are a disgrace.
Mate,
to
you're
this
wounding
country.
me. You're
You
wounding
are
me.
a lying little snake.
I am wounded. Lying little snake.
You are a lying little
Carry on.
snake.
Ooh.
Right, let's have a chat.
I'm
Why
having
do you
a chat.
support communists?
I'm having-
Why do you support...
All right, well, before we get into the video we just saw, I just want to make a distinction between, a physical attack that we saw that happened in Germany and, the heckling that we're seeing here. But something in common, I suppose. Are we seeing a more and more extreme expression of anger against politicians?
I think it goes through phases. I first experienced the hard left attacking me during the 80s. I'm from Liverpool. And even these days now, we've moved on to the momentum. And what we have seen, I represent the northwest of England, we've seen very often Conservative politicians there being hounded, harried and being accused of all sorts. And that's been pretty awful too. I was an active trade unionist in the 80s and I actually broke away from a hard left a hard left trade union. We had a lot of trade union reform, and we had death threats and all sorts of things. So I think it tends to go in phases. I think most of us are pretty robust people. So the name calling isn't so much the issue.
Sure.
It's clearly when it then transfers to physical violence. And I think, unfortunately, there are extremes on both sides of this, and there is no place for it. Certainly, there is no place for it in the United Kingdom, and there's certainly no place for it in politics
You're
at
talking
all.
about phases. Is this the kind of political environment we're in now, where this kind of behaviour just, it feels like this is the step that people take?
Well, look, I mean, it's clear that, Britain is quite polarised at the moment. I mean, the first thing I'd like to do is say, huge kudos to both Anna Soubry, who is a tough and brave woman, and Owen Jones as well, who's a journalist I rarely agree with, but again, I thought he dealt with that superbly well. I don't think I would have been as brave or as restrained as he was. I mean, the thing which makes me most uncomfortable about it was that during the referendum, a Labour MP, Joe Cox, was assassinated essentially by a lunatic who seemed to have been inspired by some of this anger. And seeing 4 or 5 burly men haranguing a middle-aged female MP makes me extremely uncomfortable. And I think it's just disgusting.
So where is that line between, politicians do get heckled?
Yeah, and I think they should, and they should be prepared to. And, there is, as we've been noting, a line to be crossed. I think politicians, particularly when you've got a very divisive issue like Brexit, one that stirs people's passions, and politics is to a degree about passion, and it always should be, because that's the essence of politics to a degree, that, yes, we all have the right to protest. We all have the right to have to express our views. And that also, it must be said, it should extend into name-calling if that's what people want to do. And most politicians are prepared to put up with it. But you're right. When it gets into a situation, and if you look at that videotape of Anna Soubry yesterday, I think we are verging into essentially intimidation. That is where the line is then crossed. Now, of course, the Met Police today, I think, have been asked to look at this by dozens and dozens of MPs. But I think the problem with this is this going to get any better? Because passions are running incredibly high.
Can I just raise a very quick point? What we are known for in the UK, apart from fighting for democracy, and people have died for it in generations before, is a sense of humour. And despite the great challenges and trials and tribulations that we have gone through as a people over the centuries, very often what we have been seen to do is to try and, at least on occasions, try and bit of humour when there are tough arguments and there are polarised positions. So I'd like to see a little bit more. I know this is a big sensitive issue. I'd like to see a little bit more of that, and a bit more of humanity, and a bit more of
less
why people. We sit here and we say, let's agree to disagree.
More of a sense of humour and less of the government acting like a joke.
Well, I'm not talking about I'm talking now about our personal behaviour.
But and
we all know what it should be.
Darren, as you were saying, I mean, the police have been asked to look into this. More than 60 British MPs have now signed a letter to the police asking them to improve their response to, threatening and abusive protesters, as some would say we saw in the video. Now, in the letter, they said that an ugly element of individuals with strong far-right and extreme-right connections have increasingly engaged in intimidatory and politically criminal acts targeting members of parliament, journalists, activists, and members of the public. We understand there are ongoing investigations, but there appears to be an ongoing lack of coordination in the response from the police and appropriate authorities. Now, there was a police officer who also said, well, we have the responsibility, yes, to protect everyone, including protesters. So, again, we're talking about that line of how far do you let them...
And I think also we should emphasise this isn't anything new. I mean, throughout history, we have ebbs and flows of political debate, and we have ebbs and flows of the expression of that. And actually, it must be stated that despite what we've seen in London over the last couple of weeks, on the whole, given the constitutional crisis the UK is in, and given how polarised, as James rightly pointed out, the country is, actually Britain has dealt with this issue on the whole in a relatively mature way and actually expressed that polarisation in a very democratic way.
Yeah, but do you agree that, so do you agree with the categorisation that there's a deteriorating public order?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, look, I don't live in Britain. I'm not experiencing it every day. I'm here in Brussels. But I mean, so I'm watching from afar. What I don't think is acceptable is basically a group of men surrounding politicians and journalists, and basically there is an element of physical intimidation there. There's nothing wrong with name calling. But
there's another point raised today, because Nigel Farage was giving interviews today in the British media, and he was saying, look, he has been harassed for a couple of years throughout this, and no one seemed to be raising any objections to that. That's what he was saying. That his car got smashed, etc.
As you've rightly pointed out, I mean, I followed Nigel Farage around for years.
So is there a double standard?
He was constantly surrounded by bodyguards. Well, look at what's happened in Germany. Look with the AfD. I mean, that's clearly coming from the far left, not the far right. One would have to suspect. So this is not something that is confined, as some would like to suggest, from the far right. It is from extremists on both sides. And when you get into that situation where politicians have to have bodyguards, where there are serious threats to life, where lives are taken, or where indeed people are beaten up on the streets, that clearly in democracies in modern day Europe is unacceptable.
But is there
I'd just like to add another point. I mean, in terms of the Labour Party, they had Luciana Berger, who's one of their Jewish members of Parliament, and others in Liverpool, where I live, actually, and they had a Labour conference last year, and she had to have security people because of the issues that they had had over anti-Semitism, some members in their party. So it seems to be spread, as we said, left and right. But it needs to be nipped in the bud. We need to put an end to this. This is not the way we do politics. People didn't die for democracy, so we would do politics like this in the UK.
Is there a different reaction depending on where the politician is from? I think that was the question.
No, but as I said, I think we are robust people. I have been called all sorts of things in my career. I'm pretty tough. Of course I am. I don't cry every time somebody calls me an awful name. But the bottom line is, that's why we have democracy. This is why we have the line in the House of Commons. So, because we stopped playing with swords. And it's all about parley. That's what the whole thing is about. So let's get back to that. Let's have these really tough debates, which are fine, and let people just calm down and just behave like they should.
Well, calm down is
this is not good enough, whether it's a guy, whether it was Nigel or anybody else. Let's have a discussion, and that's what we're talking about.
And we have, in fact, seen how public disorder and even violence has affected politicians across Europe, as you have all rightly been talking about. But when protesters are angry, how do they coordinate, in fact? How do they, how do they get together and show what they're after? Alex Morgan and our team in The Cube have been looking into this part of the story. Alex, what have you found out?
Well, Tessa, really interesting listening into your panel discussion there, and obviously sharing the videos from politicians, from people there, a lot of the perspectives of politicians. We've heard a lot about that, but what about these people who are there, who feel passionate enough to be there shouting at these politicians? What about them? Who are they? Well, perhaps one of the most prominent individuals who we've seen in many of the videos, particularly that one confronting Owen Jones, is a man called James Goodison. Now, we, after a bit of to and fro, got him to agree to speak to us here at Euronews. And he sent us a video effectively explaining who he was and why he's doing what he's doing. This is what James has to say.
Hi, my name is James Goddard, and I was one of the protesters who approached Anna Soubry and Owen Jones yesterday. My reasons for doing this are: Anna Soubry is openly trying to thwart Brexit, she's going against the democratic will of the people, and she's also going against the wishes of her constituents. Despite what the mainstream media and political class say, we are actually peaceful protesters who just want to make a difference in this country, and we feel that our voices aren't being listened to, and we're sick of being called names. We get called Nazi, xenophobic and racist by the political class, by the mainstream media and by the left. I don't see the hysteria from the mainstream media about that. It only seems there's hysteria when it's when it's from members of our side, and this is something that must be addressed.
That's James Goddard there. Now, he was very clear when I was speaking to him over Skype, just sort of chatting to him about the background. He says, well, I only got involved in all this when I heard there was going to be a second referendum. He was motivated to start protesting when he felt the democratic will of the people was being thwarted. Now, of course, many people say what he's doing isn't protesting, it's scaring people and it's abusive, but James there saying that when he's been called names, when his side's been called names, there hasn't been the outrage that politicians, that follows when politicians are called names. And he's not the only one. There are also journalists spiked online. It's a publication that backs Brexit. Well, they say this outrage when the political class are called names really is going too far. They say talk of the police getting involved more to clamp down on what these protesters are and are not allowed to shout at politicians. They say that's too far. But when I was speaking to James, he was saying, we haven't done anything wrong. We're still printing our leaflets. We're planning our protests. He says they're not going anywhere. We know the pro-Remain protesters are not going anywhere. And we know next week is a huge date in this debate. So, Tessa, things are going to be heated and they're going to stay heated well into the coming months.
All right, interesting side to the story. Thanks for that to Alex and the Cube team. Now, when you hear what he had to say there, does that change your mind about what, you know, the story that we were talking about earlier? Does it change your mind?
No. No, I mean, look,
he said he had a right
he's upset because some people have called him names. Well, then don't call other people names. You know, I don't really have, I mean, basically, now I don't know James Goddard, I don't know him from Adam, but he just has the whiff of a pound-shot Tommy Robinson.
Right.
I mean, all I would suggest about that is, though, on this idea of a second referendum, we know that the first referendum was divisive. We know that what's happened since has certainly divided the country. We know that a politician, an MP, lost her life during that referendum. I think one of the greatest arguments against a second referendum would be that it would prove, again, very, very divisive, to a level, actually, potentially, that we have not seen thus far in British politics, because there are people like him and many others who would not be very happy with the thought of a second referendum, and they do view it as an affront to democracy.
Jacqueline, I'll give you the last word on this.
My final point is 2 wrongs don't make a right. And I just think it would be helpful if people on all sides, by all means, have robust arguments. We're not wallflowers sitting here just because I'm an older female and I'm going to be offended by what somebody said. I didn't join I'mOffended.com. This is the wrong business to be in if you are a politician. But by the same token, and I'm not terribly bothered what somebody says to me, but there needs to just be a balance. And I would just urge people to have your robust discussions, but just let's be British about this, shall we? Particularly in the UK, and let's try and move it on to a rather different level.
I think it's time to start repressing our emotions again. Let's keep them in check where they belong.
No, I haven't mentioned humour. If you recall my initial, let's bring back the humour that we bring into politics.
There you go.
When we can.
All right. We'll attempt to do that here, at least, anyway.
Yeah, we shall.
Well, we have more coming up for you on the programme. Now, targeting troublemakers. Let's move to France. France introduces controversial new measures after 7 weeks of anti-government protests. Plus, avoiding the crash out, we speak with Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney about Brexit in an exclusive interview. Don't go away. Welcome back to More Politics. Now, there is no let-up in the Brexit news today. As Theresa May battles to sell her deal, there's now talk of extending Article 50. With all the latest, here is your Brexit brief. 2 years ago, the UK's ambassador to the EU strides into Brussels. In his briefcase, the letter triggering Article 50. But today, the UK's Daily Telegraph reports that British and European officials are now discussing the possibility of delaying the UK's exit from the EU. No way, says the UK's Brexit secretary, who's poured cold water on the reports. We are leaving the European Union at the 29th of March. We are not looking to extend. Counting the cost of Brexit, assets worth around 890 billion euros are being moved from Britain to new financial hubs in the EU. That's according to a new report by the consulting firm Ernst & Young. Meanwhile, Theresa May's Brexit charm offensive continues. The PM invited MPs for drinks at Number 10 last night, but on leaving Downing Street, some MPs seemed more interested in talking about the catering than the Brexit deal.
Wine was nice. Were there cheese and onion crisps?
There were no cheese and onion crisps. And indeed, I make one confident prediction. Under any circumstances, this country will be amply provided for, not only with Mars bars, not only with drinking water, but also with cheese and onion crisps.
Well, back with me in the studio, our political editor Darren McCaffrey. We also have James Crisp from The Telegraph and British Conservative MEP Jacqueline Foster. All right, Darren already brought it up earlier, the extension of Article 50. Do you think this is now a real possibility? Like each day there is a new one.
I think it's a possibility. I'm not sure it's...
It has traction. Does it have traction?
Well, Simon Coveney, he said today that the Irish government would not stand in the way. But, I mean, the problem is that when you talk about the Article 50 negotiations and the Article 50 negotiations period, look, I find it interesting, but I think it's fair to say that the majority of people have found it about as enjoyable as having their teeth removed. So are people really going to want to extend this...
Speak for yourself, James Chris. Speak for yourself. We've all loved it.
We've all loved it. I mean, I would say that, look, the fact is there isn't a lot of time. The deal needs to be backed or rejected. Every time I've tried to predict anything to do with Brexit, I've been hysterically, totally wrong. So I'm going to stop there.
Let's let Jacqueline predict.
Right. Well, I'm not looking at... I want to leave on the 29th of March, made that absolutely clear. There have been all sorts of things, obstacles that have been put in the way since the day after the result of the referendum. People have spent millions on legal challenges to try and prevent Brexit going ahead. I have never supported that. Let's have a people's vote. No, we had one 2.5 years ago. And therefore, I'm fully respectful of Simon Coveney. I mean, it's entirely up to the Irish government what they say on to whatever it is. But no, I would certainly not be supporting that isn't a way forward. So I'm with Steve Barclay on this. 29th of March is the deadline, and that's when
the whole point of this is to avoid that no-deal Brexit. I mean,
well, it is, and it's not the point of that.
But a no-deal equally is not what I want either. I don't believe no deal is helpful at all. I think we have a good deal on the table. I think there needs to be a bit further clarification for some colleagues, and we need to get this withdrawal agreement done and dusted. And we need to then be concentrating on these future arrangements where there's an awful lot of work being put into place and get these trade deals done.
But the problem with that is that, first of all, it doesn't look like there is the votes in Parliament for that deal. Second of all, unless another solution is found, the UK, you're right, is leaving on March 29th, but leaving without a deal, essentially, i.e. crashing out of the European Union.
That's what you think.
Well, it's currently in legislation, though, so there would have to be...
We're crashing out?
What, that Britain will leave the European Union without a deal?
Absolutely.
Without a deal?
No, it hasn't. Well,
it is in legislation, it is in law, so Britain is leaving the European Union and it will leave without a deal, unless there is another solution found. The problem with extending Article 50, of course, is that first of all, the European Union insisted it would have to be for a proper cause. You can just say we want to extend it because we want to. And the second question is how long for? Because, of course, there are European parliamentary elections at the end of May, of which British citizens are not taking part in, and there are questions about how legal it would be for Britain to remain a member of the European Union with no representation in the European Parliament. So even if it was to extend it, there are suggestions it would only be for a couple of months.
But the extension would not solve anything. It wouldn't solve anything.
No.
At some stage in any negotiation, I spent 15 years as a trade union negotiator before I came here. I have spent nearly 20 years in this Parliament negotiating because we draft anything to do with aviation, aerospace, maritime. I have been part and parcel of. And that's what we do here on a smaller level because it's normally issue by issue. And we have a big negotiation now that has taken place with obviously with the different institutions to get to this sort of point. So to just try and now hold this up, as I said, with the greatest respect to the Irish government, to, another couple of months here, we can't keep moving this along. A decision needs to be made on Tuesday. I'm hoping it will be the right decision by Parliament because we need to move this on.
But Theresa May has promised assurances that she knows... but she should know she isn't going to get. I mean, these assurances aren't going to be legally binding assurances. They may be an exchange of letters. I mean, to be honest, even if she was to get a fantastic legally binding assurances, I don't think that would satisfy a lot of Brexiteers in your party.
But can I just make one point?
Okay.
Where there's also a key issue which comes into play, because this was not technically a party political referendum in a way. is the position of the Labour Party. Of course, it's always party political. It was the position of the Labour Party, who are sitting there. They've not got a policy anyway, but they don't have to because they're the official opposition, who are dying to have a general election, but they're 6 points behind in the opinion polls, so they're not going to be having a good general election. And if she'd have come back...
Well, they were 6 points behind more than that last time round.
OK, well, now still 6 points after all of this. But if I may just finish. If she'd have come back with a platinum-plated, diamond-plated deal, on principle they wouldn't support her. We know they wouldn't support her. And unfortunately, there are other elements too. And that's why I'm trying to urge colleagues, because there are ways, I think, to do further reassurance, because the key issue seems to be the backstop position and the Northern Ireland position. Because I haven't heard loads of complaints from other people about
all I would also add, Tessa, is that if the British government suggests one thing and that they're promising to do one thing, almost certainly what we'll learn is the opposite will happen.
All right, so we've got to move on and talk about Ireland, because Ireland says, as has been brought up already, it would not oppose an extension to Article 50. That's according to the Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney. He spoke to reporters earlier. Now, Shona Murray, she sat down with him for an exclusive interview, and she is with us live now from Dublin. So, Shona, what did Simon Coveney tell you today?
Yeah, indeed, he did say that Ireland wouldn't stand in Britain's way if it did request an extension of Article 50, but he also made the point that that hasn't been requested, and as it stands, the withdrawal agreement is what is in place. He was joined by Heiko Maas, his German foreign minister, who also said that German solidarity was with Ireland, in particular on the issue of the backstop. Now, we know that's the most contentious part of this withdrawal agreement. Many in the UK who don't want it see it as a trap to keep the UK within the EU orbit, but Simon Coveney and Heiko Maas said it was necessary to protect the Good Friday Agreement, which ended, as we know, 3 decades of bloodshed on the island of Ireland. But I asked Simon Coveney, was there anything more that can be done to give Theresa May and the British more assurances that the backstop will be temporary and will be replaced by a future relationship? I asked him also what format that could come in.
We're happy to provide any further clarifications or reassurance that the British Prime Minister may look for. But what we've said is, and I think what the EU have said collectively, is that they're not willing to reopen the text of the withdrawal treaty. Nobody ever wants to use or trigger the backstop, but it's an insurance or mechanism that's there just in case. And if it is ever triggered, then it will only be there for a temporary period, and we will all work to try to put a more permanent solution in place that everybody can sign up to. If there is more reassurance needed, more clarity needed in terms of the backstop, its purpose, what it was designed for, what it doesn't do, which is undermine the sovereignty of the United Kingdom in Northern Ireland and in the rest of Great Britain. Because don't forget, the original backstop was just Northern Ireland specific. So, you know, it is more than a political irony now that some in Westminster are accusing the EU of trying to trap Britain in the EU customs union because that solution was a response to an ask from the British government as regards trying to ensure that the backstop worked for everybody.
Now, we know, of course, that Theresa May will be looking for further assurances, but there is a consensus here, and I've spoken to Irish government sources, that there's a question over whether those assurances can be enough to push this deal over the line. Obviously, they can't be legally binding. They can't guarantee that a trade agreement will be completed by December 2021, and they can't undermine the viability of the backstop because, as we've spoken about before, it's a necessary guarantee, according to Ireland and the EU, to protect peace on the island of Ireland. But the Irish government said it is willing to do whatever it can to help Theresa May, but that there really is quite a few nerves here. People are bracing themselves for that deal really not getting across the line on Tuesday, and really a no-deal scenario on the horizon.
Thank you for that, correspondent Shona Murray. James, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of quick points. I mean, first of all, I think that the Irish backstop will be triggered if the deal is made. I don't think it's possible to make a free trade agreement with the EU in the, 18 months? 18 months. Because it's just never been done before. We've seen how the negotiations are difficult. So what we'll have, you know, we may not extend Article 50, but we just have another cliff edge. We've got exactly the same sort of situation there. And Simon Coveney is right. The British government did ask for the whole backstop to be a whole UK solution. And Theresa May did ask for that, but doesn't have the support in Parliament. So
while at the same time telling MPs that, making guarantees to Northern Irish MPs about not having a border in the Irish Sea. So you can have either or.
There's just been a lack of honesty and straight talking throughout this entire process.
Well,
last word, Jacqueline.
Where I would disagree is you're quite right to say it is a relatively short period of time, the transition period, about, 20 months or so. There has been masses of preparation actually already done in terms of the basic stuff for trade deals by Liam Fox's department. That's what he's been doing for 2.5 years. Indeed.
We learn something new every day.
We also look at political will, and my final point is it wouldn't be in the EU's interest to end up in an ambiguous situation at the end of the transition period. And this was why what I did agree with was that there was an independent body that would be brought in, that's nothing to do with the EU or us, if it were that some sort of dispute arose. So I am confident. I am a confident person that actually there are solutions here. I am the optimist. And I would urge colleagues to support the Prime Minister on Tuesday.
We will leave Brexit there for the moment, and let's go to a deadlock, an impasse in the United States. Because tonight, U.S. President Trump addresses the Americans in a televised speech about his proposed border wall amid a government shutdown. Well, let's take a look. The U.S.-Mexico border wall has been divisive from the start. For some, a humanitarian crisis. For others, a matter of security. And soon it could become a national emergency. U.S. President Trump is apparently considering the unprecedented measure to free up funds to get the wall built. And here's why. The U.S. government is deadlocked over the issue, partially shut down for 3 weeks now, leaving hundreds of thousands of workers unpaid. And no end in sight. Tonight, Mr. Trump has been granted a primetime TV slot on all major networks to address the nation, a move that has only provoked fresh political fury from Democrats who say they deserve equal airtime. I mean, I think the argument happening in the United States is whether, the platform that Donald Trump is going to get tonight for what he is about to say, whether or not that is supposed to be given to him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think should he be given a platform? I think George Bush was on immigration. Barack Obama wasn't. Ultimately, this is a decision for the networks. I mean, he is president of the United States. The United States is going through a shutdown at the moment. He's talking about introducing emergency powers. And there's at least editorially a strong case to make for showing this decision. But be in no doubt that this is like a really important moment for Donald Trump. This wall is crucial, absolutely crucial to potentially his re-election campaign and indeed to his presidency, because he has staked so much
and triggering emergency measures. I mean, is this something? I mean, that other leaders could take a lesson from if they want to get something passed?
No, I think we all do politics a different way. I mean, I've been in the States before Donald Trump, and they have this situation, and it arises every year with every government. And then people are worried, they were virtually closing the FAA and the Federal Aviation Authority down. Would they be paid? Would people be laid off? So it's a bit of I think, an odd situation, actually. And somebody said to me, do they do it? Is it always like this in the US? And I said, well, it appears to be like that because we are supposed to do things very differently.
Yeah.
But he seems to have his own unique way of, I think, winding everybody up. Whether he gets his wall or he doesn't get his wall, I have no idea, quite frankly. I mean, from my point of view as a politician, it's very important that we have good relations with the United States government of the day. Whoever leads that clearly is the choice of the American people.
Waiting and watching.
We are waiting and we are watching, but we don't want to do politics in the same way.
I think everyone's watching. He's great for ratings, isn't
he? Absolutely. Yeah. There you go. All right, after the break here on Raw Politics, France cracks down on protest violence, but the far left says new measures threaten a key democratic right. That's coming up. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, France's Yellow Vest protests have shown no signs of slowing down in the new year, while the government has signaled it is ready to crack down on protesters. Last night, the French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announced the government is seeking a new law to quash unauthorized protests. And here is what he had to say.
dès que l'on constate des actes délictueux, dès qu'on peut le faire, on procède aux interpellations. Parce qu'encore une fois, c'est la réponse de la loi, elle doit prévaloir et nous ne pouvons pas accepter, enfin personne ne peut accepter l'idée que de façon totalement, en toute impunité, des gens disent on n'est pas d'accord, donc on va casser. Et d'ailleurs, pour beaucoup d'entre eux, ceux qui cassent, ils ne se posent même pas de la question de savoir s'ils sont d'accord ou pas. Ils viennent pour casser, parfois ils viennent pour piller, parfois ils viennent aussi, et disons-le clairement, Monsieur Boulot, pour remettre en cause les institutions. Parce que...
And joining us to talk about this is Darren McCaffrey. He's still here, our political editor at Euronews. We have French MEP Christine Revaud-Dallon-Bonnefoy with the Socialists and Democrats group. And we also have Fabrice Potier, Chief Strategy Officer at Rasmussen Global. All right, we just heard Edouard Philippe there. He actually framed this call for the new law as a way to protect the French's right to protest. Do you see it as that? Is that how it is?
Yeah, I think we are facing a form of political hooliganism. And the government is trying to draw the line between what are legitimate grievances and what are clearly illegal actions and activities. And clearly the rule of law is not negotiable in France as it is, it's not in any other country. So I think they are just trying to draw the line in order to probably better herd and address the legitimate grievances.
But how far is too far? Because the far left, the left would say this is an assault, in fact, on the French's right to protest. What do you think?
We have the right to protest in France. This is very important, but we have to respect the law. This is also very important. And I think that in this case, we don't need a new law. We need to respect the actual law. We have everything in order in the law, in our justice, to be sure that everything can be protected. But for this, we need to remind the rule of the law in France. We have already... When we want to have a demonstration in France, we must say to the prefecture, we are going to manifest, do we have the right or not? And if they don't have, they won't do it.
So there's no need to introduce a new law, is that what you're saying?
There's no need to introduce it, but we need to have more means, more of police officers present in the streets. And I regret that last Saturday, in certain streets of Paris, there were not enough people to be sure that the law was protected and the citizens were protected. We are facing a big danger in face of it. But
because the interesting point is that, clearly the law...
The law is there. We have everything.
But it has... these protests have been going on for 2 months almost now. There's no sign that the violent element to them is getting any better.
A lot of violent elements have been arrested, but maybe not enough. I don't know. I'm not working in the justice process, and I completely condemn every violent act. I am in favor of demonstrations, but everyone has to respect the law. It's very important too.
Yeah, do you think there is a possibility of a backlash for this? When a tough new law is introduced and, Macron's image already suffering, would it in fact, because now the support for Gilets jaunes is going down.
It's not a law about demonstration, which is important. It's a law about social justice, tax justice. This is what we are waiting for, not a law on question of how we are going to prevent demonstrations. This is not the need of the French.
But the president has already passed some measures and taken some social measures, and is really looking also to take some more, and is also going to start a national dialogue to hear what the grievances are and how to translate them into solutions and how to address them. But on whether it's too tough or not, I think clearly we are facing some new form of political hooliganism, and people are systematically and purposely breaking things and burning things, and they need to be a cause.
The question is why, though? Why? Why is there this violent element?
Because part of, I think, the Gilets jaunes has been also radicalized and instrumentalized by some groups who just want to break things. And there are people like this in France, as there are in other countries, and we need now a set of measures.
Yellow vests are not a group.
No,
some of them.
Ensemble.
So don't say the people are doing. This is absolutely...
So who is doing that then? This is what I said.
Some people, but not the...
This is not what I say. I say there are some people inside the Gilets jaunes who are using the Gilets jaunes to actually carry out violent actions.
Okay, let's go to Paris first and get some reaction to get a better understanding of how people on the ground in France feel about the Prime Minister's idea of this new law. Let's talk to our correspondent, Stéphane de Vries. Stéphane, can you tell us what reaction we've seen politically and also from the general public?
Well, there have been some reactions, for instance, by human rights lawyers and also NGOs, human rights NGOs, saying that this is sets a dangerous precedent of limiting the freedom of expression. France already has one of the toughest laws in the European Union when it comes to limiting the freedom of expression of its citizens. And other people also say that there are already enough laws that can be applied to these rioters or hooligans or whomever you would like to call them. So the government doesn't really need new laws. And then again, it's also not as complicated as it sounds, because there is already a law, at least there's a text that has been voted last September in the French Senate, exactly on the measures announced by Edouard Philippe last night. It was an initiative by the Conservative Party, the Republicans here in France. So the text is already ready, and the government now wants the lower house, the Assemblée, to decide on the text, and that will probably happen somewhere in February.
Stefan, is there a sense that this announcement is going to embolden the Yellow Vest protesters or perhaps quell it?
It's hard to say, because the Yellow Vests do not really exist. It's not a uniform movement. It's more a gathering of a lot of individuals with all kinds of different grievances. However, we've seen that over the last weekend the violence has intensified. It seems that a lot of people think they have nothing more to lose. And also, of course, the attitude of Emmanuel Macron is dangerous in this, because he is actually not communicating. He's only communicating through Twitter. And it doesn't really seem that the Yellow Vests accept the things that he gave to them last December. So the government is preparing again for a heavy weekend, a weekend of heavy violence. This Saturday will be the 9th consecutive weekend of protests here in France. But it's clear that this revolt, if you would like to call it like that, or mass demonstrations are not over, and Emmanuel Macron is effectively facing probably the worst political crisis of the last decade here in France.
All right, thank you for that, Stéphane de Vries there in Paris. Now, I'd like to...
I'm not French, and I don't necessarily understand the French psyche on these things, but when I look at most protests over the last couple of decades in France, they've always had a violent element. They've always had a physical attacking element. And I can understand why. Why is that? Why do the French, when they protest, there is always a violent element?
But it's not just in France. I mean, we've seen that when the protests here in Brussels too, you have the violent elements. But I think one thing I'd like to ask is the focus, especially, well, I guess the media comes into play here. Do we see the violence because that's what we see on television? And do the media have a role to play in highlighting the violence? What do you think?
I think there's a bit of that, because as you can see on some pictures, the angles of the picture make it, look dramatic and look a war zone. And in fact, it's just one car that has been burned at the end of a street. But there is a real issue of systematic, repetitive violence, because we're talking about protests over several weekends. And I think that there is an issue about also the words and what this violence is directed against. Here it's directed against some elected members of the parliament, members of the government, prefecture, so some members, some representative of the French public service. And this is where it's, as the Prime Minister say, it's also an attack against the French institutions and French democratic institutions. So there's a real issue. There's a clash here between direct democracy and representative democracy. And I think what Macron is trying to reconcile is to find a new balance where people can voice their differences, and they are right to have grievances and differences, but where you also have elected members of the parliament in France, but also in Brussels, who can also carry these grievances into legislations.
Very quickly, I'll give you the last word.
If you want to stop every Saturday demonstration of the Yellow Vest, first of all, you put into action and you propose new reform. Everyone among the Yellow Vest, even if I said it's not uniform, and I completely repeat it, they want to have back the wealth tax. And for this issue, the government, two ministers says we won't put this into the debate, the big debate Emmanuel Macron said we would have. He said no. On this tax, no, we won't put it into debate. So as long as you won't listen to what the people is waiting for, tax justice, social justice. You still have demonstration, and violence is not the problem.
And this is going to continue on Saturday. I mean, all eyes are going to be exactly. And then Saturday, we're all going to be watching what's happening there. All right, still to come on Raw Politics. It is almost time for you to have your say. Our phone lines will be open, ready to hear your thoughts and opinions on everything we're talking about during Your Call. That's our new interactive political program, and we will tell you what's on the agenda tonight. That's coming up. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, we have spoken here tonight about public disorder and why there's a rise in violence in political discourse. But now we want to hear from you. What do you think? Directly following this program, we are live with Your Call. Tell us about the issues today that are impacting you. Now, the lines are open for viewers in Western and Central Europe. You can look at your screen. The phone number is +322 283 0283. You can email us at rawpoll@euronews.com and let us know what you think with the hashtag #RawPolitics on Twitter and Facebook. And you can also Skype us. Use the username rawpolitics, all of that in one word. All right, joining us in the studio, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, Brussels correspondent Maeve McMahon, and back with us, the Telegraph's James Crisp. So, Darren, you did your call already. Well, both of you have done your call. So, what are we expecting tonight?
Well, I think what is really interesting, picking up on what we were just talking about before the break, is this sense of protests and where the line is drawn between legitimate, sometimes direct protest, and ones that spill into violence, because clearly, whether it is in Britain with Brexit, whether it is in France with social reform, whether it here is in Belgium and Brussels, and elsewhere, people are expressing and very passionate about very divisive issues on politics, from migration through to standards of living. And the question is, I think, how far do you go? Or how far should you be allowed to go?
And what we highlight the different views.
And in fact, when we're reporting, be it here in Belgium or all around Europe and all the corners of Europe, people are always saying they feel that they're just not heard by politicians. And we did have a caller last night calling from Malta. He said he felt like he was treated like dirt by politicians. He spoke about that massive gap between him and politicians. And we all know we're also participating in this Brussels bubble here in Brussels. So with this Your Call, we're going to try and break that down.
Yeah, and hear from do you think there are voices missing, really? I mean, there are a lot of voices missing.
There's certainly a lot of voices missing. I mean, you only have to look around the European Parliament. It's hardly the world's most diverse institution.
No.
It's not very representative of Europe as it actually is. And I mean, I've got a bit of sympathy for people who say they don't think politicians are listening to them. I don't think politicians are listening to people. I don't think that excuses the kind of sort of bullying or violence that we've seen recently across Europe. But, you know, there is a reason for this anger, and it is the politicians' fault.
So in this case, do give us your view.
Go or say something or get whatever you want off your chest.
Add your opinion. All right, we still have one more thing for you before we go. Tonight's Raw Moment. It comes from California, where the state's new governor faced an unusual staged invasion. Let's take a look.
Now more than ever, we Californians know how much a house matters and children matter. But all kids, not just the children of a governor and a filmmaker, should have a good life in California. Should be ripped away from their parents at the border. And nor should they be left hungry. Nor should they be left hungry when politicians seek to pour billions into a wall that should never be built.
He really didn't want to be there, did he?
I mean, it looked. You're
so cynical. You thought this was all a big stunt.
It worked well with what he had to say. I mean, what do you think?
Absolutely, I thought it was super cute, and that will obviously gain him a lot of votes and a lot of popularity because people always adore cute.
Staged or natural?
Ugh, I hate politicians. You know that? Just scum.
See?
Scum.
That opinion. There you go. All right. We would like to hear your view. Tell us what you think, what you're talking about. I am on Twitter @TestRcelia, or you can follow us at Euronews and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. And don't forget to stay with us for Your Call. Give us your opinion, your views. All right. Bye for now. Good evening.